Hey guys, and welcome back. Today we're going over the rooks. In the previous videos we already said that bishops need open diagonals, knights need outposts, and now for the rooks need open files. Rooks usually come into the full action in the stage of the endgame, but you also have to use them in the middle games. Even in the opening you have to think about your rooks. I'm going to show you an example of a player who doesn't care about his rooks, and I'll show you why this is bad and why he should care about his rooks even in the opening. So let's say the openings goes d4, d5, e3, knight to f6, knight to f3, bishop to f5, and now he plays knight to c3. And this is actually, I would say, a pretty bad move because you're not thinking about the future of your rook here. As we said, rooks want open files, and I'm not sure how this rook is going to get an open file, because here on these two squares it doesn't have an open file because these pawns are here on these files. Sure, it will support these pawns, but rooks are really the most active on the open files. So the player with the white pieces here should probably play a move like c4 and then bring his knight to c3, because then this rook could come to this c1 square, and when some exchanges happen, then this rook would be on an open file here. And if you look at this here, in this position this is not going to happen, because this pawn is stuck behind this knight, and it's going to be hard to advance it to the square c4, and this is just basically a waste of move. If you want then to make your rook more active, you need to move your knight again and then play c4. So this is really a bad move here. So usually if you want to make use of the rooks in the middle games, you want to do that with supporting a pawn with a pawn break, or just challenging the other pawns with your pawns. And I'll just show you this in this example. For example, from the English opening, because I know it well. Here, the best move I think is probably f4. I mean, you have other moves like h3 and then bishop e3, because if you play bishop to e3 immediately, he can play knight to g4, and it's a bit annoying, and that's why I want to play h3 first in these lines. But let's say this is a very good move here, f4, and because we're focusing on the rooks, we're going to play f4 here, and I would play this probably also in my own game if I would play it right now. So from this position here you can see that your rook looks pretty good here, because you can already see this pawn going to f4, and there is a high possibility some exchanges will happen and your rook will really be effective on this open file. And even if exchanges don't happen, your rook is still supporting this pawn and it's doing a great job. So that's why you want to play f4 in this position, strike at the center, and this is how you basically use your rook in the middle games usually. Because now if he takes, you can you have 4 ways of capturing, but I think that capturing with a pawn is a pretty good option, and your rook is still supporting your pawn, maybe for a future f5. And if this rook wasn't there, then f5 wasn't possible, because he has 2 defenders of this square and you have 1. And so rooks aren't just useful in the end games but also in the middle games. and you have to use them in the right way. The next thing about rooks is you always want to double them on the file because together they're stronger, they're supporting each other, and you want to get them to this 7th rank where they can just eat all the pawns and um, really cause big problems to your opponent, as I will just show you here. So it's white to move, and the absolute best move in this position is rook to b7. Just attacking the pawns and keeping this rook passive here because it needs to defend this pawn. And now if he tries to defend this pawn passively, you just double on this file, and you can see why doubling is very great because he can't even challenge your rooks now for the file because he doesn't have enough defenders now when you doubled up on this b file. He can't move his rook either anywhere because you just take his pawn, and this rook because you take this pawn. That's why also rooks on the 7th or the 2nd rank are very powerful, especially if they're doubled there, because usually there are going to be some pawns here and that you can take, and also the king, which is going to be in danger. So here if you play something like king here, then your next goal is to just double on the 7th rank. He still can't do anything because all his pawns are just hanging. If he has to play something, and then you double up on this 7th rank. Now you're putting really a lot of pressure on this pawn and also this pawn, so everything is going to fall basically. It's just over here because if you play something like this, then you can decide basically what you want to do. You can just take this pawn first, and then on the second move, let's say he is just desperate and tries something, and then on the next move you take this pawn. You're just going to eat all these pawns here, and then at some point probably move your rook away and push these pawns and try to promote a queen and just win the game. So that's why if you had your rook, for example, here on the a1 square and it was your move, you definitely want to play rook to b1 just to get that open file before your opponent does. If it was black to move here, he would probably challenge your rook, challenge the file, unless you saw what happens. You just double here your rooks, and now it's a fight for that file, and now the game is most probably drawn because your opponent managed to succeed and just bring the rook to an open file as quickly as possible. Because now it's not possible for you to double up here, because your opponent is just going to take your rook and then defend this promotion square, and now you have to defend this pawn, and this is not clear like it was before. He's probably going to push this pawn, and then um, you're gonna have to stop this pawn, and he will take your pawn, you will take his pawn, and this is going to be a draw. So that's why always fight for the open files. A very cool idea that wasn't played in really a lot of games, but we saw it in some games, and it's called the Alekhine's gun. And that's basically when you double to your rooks on a file, and then you add your queen behind them, so it's really extra powerful. And I had this Alekhine's gun once in my game, and I will probably analyze this game because it was very interesting and it was just overpowered, and of course I won the game. But in this position, if you're white, you probably want to play queen to c1, add more pressure to this um, weak c7 pawn. There's really a lot of pressure, you can see, And it's important that your queen is behind these two rooks, because if it was in front of them, then your queen really couldn't take this pawn, because the rook would just take the queen. And here black should just mm, defend his pawn, let's say by moving his queen there. He's defending successfully for now this weak pawn, but now you have to challenge black's structure to make him move the pawn, or just try to open this file in some way, because then your Aлекhine's gun is going to be the most powerful. And in this position, black can. Your idea is basically to play b6, and when he takes, you take. You're just threatening. You're just going to win this pawn. If he takes, then okay, I'll just show this to you. If he plays something dumb, then okay, you're threatening to win this pawn here. And if he takes, you take. You're still threatening to do this, and he can't take because you win his rook. And he can't play this because you just take the pawn, and when he takes, you take again. Because you have enough protection here uh, from your queen and your rook. And you just won a very important pawn, which is probably going to promote. You can play this on the next move. I mean, it matters what your opponent plays, but this is just a winning position here. So, but if your opponent tries to stop it with a move such as b6, then you should take this pawn. He still can't take with this pawn because this rook would fall, and he takes back, and he's still kind of defending this weak pawn. But you can see he gave away here this weak square that you can use, and your threat is clear now. You want to just take this pawn, and this would work because of the pin here on the c file, and you just won a pawn, and you have this whole file for yourself, which is just very great. And this is just an example. These bishops really don't matter here. I could put them out of the board if you think why this one is so badly placed. But I wanted to make the example like this, that here this queen couldn't attack this pawn, so I decided to put a bishop there. Anyway, um, so yeah, if he plays this, you get to play this move. And how can he stop this threat here? I think that he actually can't. If he wants to protect his rook even more, to just stop these ideas with rook taking on b6, then you can take this pawn and you're absolutely winning again. So we showed the power of the Alekhine's gun here, and even if you can't open this file here, you're going to put really big pressure on the pawns that are here. And except if the pawns were like, I don't know, here, then it wouldn't make much sense to put the Alekhine's gun here, but I don't know, maybe somewhere else. I just want to show you one more example how you can use the power of the rooks in the middle game. It's actually the same idea that I showed you before, but just so you can get used to it, what to do with your rooks. And here this is an English opening symmetrical variation, and from here in this position you have the ideas with rooks already. And these ideas are basically, you want to play rook to b1, and your plan is to play a3 and b4. As you will see if he plays some random moves, and then you play it, And this rook is really doing a great job supporting this pawn here, this pawn push, because if this rook wasn't there, then this pawn would be loose, and now it isn't. This rook can also support further pushes of this pawn like b5, and it's pretty active on this b file. It's not an open file, but just to show you that rooks don't always need to be on open files to be useful pieces. I just wanted to show you another example why it is important to put pressure on one file and to double up the rooks on this file, and that before you open a file uh, you want to actually prepare for it, so when the file opens, this file is going to be yours. So in this position here you can see black is a little bit worse because this bishop is pretty bad and this bishop is pretty good. Um, but if you in this position, if you take here right away, it's actually not that good because black is not going to take with this pawn because it just gives you a passed pawn and a weakness to attack, a backwards pawn, which we're going to talk about in another video. But he's going to take it with this a pawn, and now black is still a little bit worse because of this bishop, but it's not the end of the world. I mean, he's fighting for that file, so it's okay for him. So that's why you want to prepare to open this file. So black is going to be in trouble. That's why you play rook to a3 in this position. And why you play that? You play that because you want to bring your other rook here and just put pressure on this file because it's going to open. Now black does the same here, and but you're one tempo up, and here if you take it, it's still it's nothing here. So you want to get the another attacker into the action, and now it's a lot of pressure here. If black does something, I don't know, moves his queen, then now your threat is to take this pawn, and he can't take there because you're just going to win here because you have so much pressure here, and this is just winning. Um, that's why this position black took the pawn to release this pressure here because it was too much for him. White was just winning it. Uh, but now when he did that, this pawn, as you can see, became a weakness. He has no other pawns that protect this pawn. That's why white is going to focus all his forces to this one pawn. Here we actually forced black to make his own weakness, and we're going to explore this weakness now, but I will talk about exploring a weakness in another video. So in this example, if here the player with the white pieces just put his rook on the a1 square, and it was really smart because he knew that this file is going to open up and he wants to challenge that file as quick as possible when it opens up. Because if he doesn't, then then black will just take this open file and will have pressure along this file. So this was a good decision. And if black here decided to move the rook out of the file to avoid this pressure, this would also be bad because then you take immediately, and if he takes with this pawn, you have a pass pawn, and if you exchange all the pieces, then this pass pawn is going to be very important and will queen. So that's why he takes with this pawn, and then you take the file, and the file is yours, and you can use it for operations like coming on the 7th rank with your rooks and just destroying the black king. So let's do a quick summary now. First, when you talk about rooks, they need open files, because if your rook is stuck behind your pawn chain, then it's not really effective, and it doesn't attack a lot of squares, and just doesn't help your army with operations. So secondly, pawn support. If rooks don't have an open file, they're also pretty useful to just help your pawns do the pawn breaks, or just expanding on the queen side or on the king side, just supporting these pawns to go forward and do whatever you want. Thirdly, you have to fight for these open files. So you want to double your rooks and get more control over that file that your opponent has. So when you do this, this file is just going to be yours, and you can uh, just go into his position and just get a pretty big advantage. So the fourth thing is the 7th rank. If you get your rooks to the 7th rank, then congratulations, you just won the game. I'm just kidding. But actually, if you manage to put your rooks on the 7th rank, you're most probably just going to take all his pawns on the 7th rank and also attack his pieces, like I showed you in an example. So always when you have the file for yourself, think about this idea of getting your rooks to the 7th rank. And lastly, we talked about a very cool idea, which is called the Alekhine gun. When you put two rooks on an open file and the queen behind them, the name says it all. It's just also overpowered. If your opponent manages to get that file back, then he's an awesome player. Then send me his number. I want all his contacts. Alright, if you find the video useful, please share it, because this really means a lot to me. And yeah, that's all for today, and I'll see you in the next video.